Well, hello and welcome to my channel of Java Noobs. My name is Sharath and you are viewing my Java video tutorial series. If you haven't seen my previous videos, I would suggest you to see it first, and below is the link. Java Basics Part 1, Question 8. What is a constructor and what is a method? Well, a constructor is a set of instructions designed to initialize an instance of a newly created object. So when an object is created in a Java class, then a constructor is basically a set of rules which initializes these newly created objects. There are two simple rules for constructors. The first rule is a constructor should have the same name as the class name. So you cannot mention any other name. Whatever the class name is, that should be the same name as the constructor. A constructor must not return a value. Constructor basically doesn't return a value. So these are the two rules for a constructor. Now there are two types of constructors. The two types are default constructors and parameterized constructor. A default constructor is a constructor without parameters. Okay, so a constructor without parameters is known as default constructor, and a default constructor is a constructor which is automatically created by the compiler in the absence of any constructor. Meaning the default constructor, even though we create it or no, or even though we declare it or no, the compiler will automatically construct the default constructor, but it will not be visible to us. So if we manually put in the constructor, then the constructor will obviously not create another default constructor. Every class should have a default constructor, and that is compulsory. The next constructor is a parameterized constructor. Parameterized constructors are required to pass parameters on creation of objects. Now a parameterized constructor is a constructor in which we will be passing some parameters or some argument on creation of objects. Okay, so if you pass any kind of parameters to a constructor, that is known as parameterized constructor, and if you do not pass any parameters, it is known as default constructor. Now if we define only parameterized constructors, then we cannot create an object with a default constructor. This is because compiler will not create default constructor. You need to create a default constructor explicitly. Like I just told you earlier, you will have to manually create a constructor explicitly. I will be showing you both the examples of default constructor as well as the parameterized constructor. Unfortunately, due to shortage of time, I won't be typing everything down in Eclipse, but I've already typed it, so I'll just show you the example of both these constructors, that is default constructor as well as parameterized constructor. Now this is the example of default constructor in the slide, and this is the example of parameterized constructor in the slide. Now in Eclipse, here is the example of a default constructor. For the default constructor example, I have named the class as default constructor itself. Since the default constructor should have the same name as the class name, the constructor's name is default constructor here. Now what I have done is, inside this default constructor, I have typed in system.out.println, and I am inside the default constructor. Okay, once the default constructor, that is this block, once the default constructor is created in the class, we have to create a main method. So I've typed in public static void main string args, and inside this I've created a new object. Okay, I've named this object as dcon. Okay, so when I run this program, this should be the output. I am inside the default constructor. So whatever is inside the default constructor will be printed on the console. Now to run the program, go to run and click on the first link, run. Look at this. I am inside the default constructor. This is the output for a default constructor, and this is the example for a default constructor. Here is an example of a parameterized constructor. We need to pass certain parameters into the constructor. So firstly, I am creating a variable called name of string type, which is private, and I have also created a constructor. Now since the constructor should have the same name as the class name, and inside we are passing parameter known as string str. Here we are having this dot name is equal to str. What this does is it resolves the naming conflicts, and in the later tutorials I will explain to you in a much better way. But for the time being, just understand that by using this keyword we are referring to the variable in the constructor. Now inside the constructor I have written two lines: system.out.println. I am inside parameterized constructor, that is the first line, and the second line is system.out.println. The parameter value is plus str. I've obviously written a main method after the constructor, and inside the constructor I have created a new object, and I've named this object as pcon. I have also passed the string here called as Java Noobs. Okay, so when I run this program, I should be getting an output as I am inside the constructor and Java Noobs. So this should be the output. So I'll quickly go to run and run this program. There we go. Here is the output. I am inside parameterized constructor. The parameter value is Java Noobs. Okay, so that was the example of both default constructors and parameterized constructor. The next thing what I will be teaching is what is a method. Well, a method is a collection of statements that are grouped together to perform an operation. Okay, that's pretty much self-explanatory, so I don't need to explain it much further. So basically a method is a set of statements that are put together to perform a task. So here is the syntax of the method. Firstly, we need to have an access. Okay, so access is any kind of modifiers, so it can be public, static, private, protected, and so on. The next thing what you need to mention for a method is a return type. The method is not returning any kind of value, then you can put in void. Next necessary thing in a method is a name. Obviously a method should have a name, and the name can be anything, it can be of your choice. If you can notice here, there are a pair of brackets here. Okay, now in these brackets whatever you pass, that is int a, int b, string name, string value, anything, whatever you pass will be called as the parameters, and it should have a body. Okay, so this is the basic syntax. So public void add int a comma int b with a body. This is known as a method. Don't worry about methods too much, because almost every program what we will be doing in the future will have a method, and I will explain you more about methods as and when we are progressing. Yeah, so that's pretty much about what a constructor is and what a method is. So thank you very much for watching the video, and if you like my video, please don't forget to rate, comment and subscribe.